All right. Well, we're gonna get started here. It's just like Summit View. We're starting a little bit late, but there's always little technical difficulties and things like that. And this is our first ever live stream, so that's fun. But the circumstances of which it's happening are not so much an enjoyable thing. I was talking to Erin last night before we went to bed, and I was just telling her how surreal this whole experience is. And I think a lot of us are feeling that way. By the way, you may hear lots of little noises of doors opening and things like that. We're going to do the live stream at the church, but we're not able to get that up and running. So welcome to my living room. And it feels really weird not talking to a group of people and instead looking at a camera. So that's different. But I'm probably the only one not wearing PJs right now either. So that's a little different also. But yeah, if you hear little noises, things like that, apologize for that. That's family life. That's just the way it is. But, with everything that's going on right now, we thought, what is the best decision to make? What's the best thing that we could possibly do for our church in this time? And really, we looked at so many different options, thinking through so many different ways of gathering. Should we meet as a large church on Sunday morning? Should we keep doing that? And ultimately, we just felt that it would be best to go with prudence and to be a little more cautious at this time. And it's hard to tell what this is going to become, but we don't want to be fearful. And I just want everybody to know that the reason that we're doing this right now is not because we are afraid of the coronavirus. It's mainly because we want to care for you. We want to love you well. We want to make sure that you are taken care of. But also, in addition to that, we have a lot of medical staff in our church, and so the understanding that trying to flatten that curve is very, very important. And so we're going to do our efforts to do that as well, to help our community flatten that curve. So what we're going to do this morning is we're just going to keep things being business as usual. We're except for the crying and the knocking around of chairs and all that kind of stuff. We're going to keep things as business as usual. And we are going to keep going through our James series. And if you are having difficulty with technical things and stuff like that, or if you can't hear the audio or whatever it is, go ahead and comment. And my son Jonah is actually running all the technology today for the first time. So we're giving this our best shot. But please extend grace to us as we try to work these things out. Oh, is it very quiet? So yeah, let me know if there's certain things. And is that window too bright? We could probably move some stuff. There. Oh. Okay, so hopefully that should be a little bit better, and I'll pull the microphone a little closer. Again, we're working all this out first time, so thank you for your grace in that. Hold on a second. So yeah, sorry guys, there may be a lot of technical things going on here. I'm not sure. We'll do our best with what we have. Let me know if we need to change things, and we'll try to adjust as we go. Just real quick before we start going to James, is there anything specifically that we can do that's going to make this more beneficial for you? with the limited technological expertise that we have, are we good to go? We're good to go? I know there's a little delay on the stream, so good to go? Okay. Alright, so as we move into James, we wanted to just keep things consistent. We wanted to make it as normal as possible, right? So we are still going to go through James. We're still going to gather as small groups and be discerning about that. We are going to still try to encourage one another, pray for one another, all those things. Okay. Now there's a large echo. Okay.
Yes. It was in the next.
She said, I think that's good now.
All right, church. We're going to do this. We're going to get through this together. And that's, this is fun. This is really fun. So let me pray. And we'll go into James, and we'll get this thing going, and then we're going to spend some time in prayer at the end, a little bit more focused prayer. Mike and Heather Bile put together a prayer sheet, which I'll send out a link to that. So those are things that we've been praying about today. Actually, I believe that the President instituted this as a National Day of Prayer. Which is great. So we're going to offer up that sheet so that you have some things to be praying for. But we'll pray about some of those things at the end here. But before we get started, let's pray together. Lord God, we just come before you, knowing, God, that there are so many things that we've been thinking about, so many things going through our minds, so many things that are vying for the attention of our hearts. And this can be a very scary time. Nobody denies the fact that when you go to a store and you see all the groceries gone, or you see people panicking all over the place, or you see the constant media feed of all the difficult things that are going on in Italy, for instance, and in the rest of Europe. And now that's on our doorstep. And we here in the Greeley-Evans area now are starting to get a taste of what people in China and people in Europe have been experiencing. And Lord, we need you. We need you. We want to fall upon you as the rock, as the foundation for our lives, and as our hope in this time. And so that's why, God, we're going to come to your word this morning and keep going through it. It's because life cannot stop. We cannot simply crawl into a corner and be afraid. We can't hide ultimately from the fallenness of this world, and this virus is just a very obvious view of how fallen everything is. So Lord, I just want to ask you to please bless this time. You help technology to work better if it's not working, that you help things to function correctly, and that you would bless the brothers and sisters of some of your community church and anyone else who might be watching this morning, that you would bless them by speaking to them through your word. And I pray that you would do that in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we're going to keep going in James. So open up to James chapter 1. Okay. It's registering. Sorry guys, there was a message about the mic not being plugged in. If that's true, just comment about that. Or you can check to make sure that your stream's not muted or something. So are we good on volume? I want to make sure before we keep going here. But yeah, in the meantime, turn to James chapter 1. Are we good? We good on volume? This is a family enterprise here. Hey, Aaron, we good on volume?
I'll have to check. When it went loud, I had to turn it off.
Okay. Anyone? Just like some of you styles were perfectly last night. And now it's going a little haywire. Is it working? Volume's working now? Okay. All right, so turn to James. We're going to be at the end of James, verses 26 to 27. And remember, leading up to this point, it was, we good? Yeah, leading up to this point, we had talked about let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. The anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. And putting away filthiness, rampant wickedness. And then we moved into being doers of the word and not hearers only, right? So there's this idea of, as we hear God speak to us through His word, we have to choose to do something about that. We have to choose to follow what He has said. And if we don't, then James says that we are deceiving ourselves. And we're going to see more of that today. James is going to give us a little bit more example of that in verses 26 to 27, where he says, if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So if anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So that's what we're looking at today. And you might hear a little cooing of my daughter there, that's fine. But what do you think of when you hear the words religion and religious? You might think of belief systems, you might think of traditions, you might think of, people might say, oh, I hold to this certain faith. You know, so you have the Muslim religion, Islam, you have Christianity, you have Judaism, you have Buddhism, you have Hinduism, there's all these various religions. And as you think about that, you might think of traditions, you might think of kind of meaningless acts that people are saying they believe something and they're doing all this extra stuff. So you might think of religion in that way. You might think especially of hypocrisy, right? Of people believing something but not really following through with it. Those might be the types of ideas that you have when you think of religion, when you think of being religious. It has a real negative connotation. In fact, when I was in college, I remember it was very popular as a Christian at that time to wear a T-shirt that on the chest said, religion kills. And you've probably heard also kind of a famous Christian phrase these days is, it's not about religion, it's about a relationship. And you kind of wonder, well, okay, is religion really all that bad? Is that right? That Christianese phrase that we've come to use, it's not about religion, it's about a relationship. Is that right? Is religion really a negative thing? Really, being religious simply means believing in something and submitting your life to that thing as the authority in your life. And according to James in this passage, religion and being religious actually isn't the problem. That religion itself is not the problem. Being religious is not the problem. Our focus on the word religion, I think, is actually possibly missing the mark entirely. To James, religion itself is neutral, really. It can either be good or it can be bad. It can either be evil or it can be pure, as he says here. He doesn't see it as in opposition to a relationship with Jesus, right? You've got your relationship with Jesus Christ, but then you also have, you're also religious. You submit your life to Him. You live for Him. And James doesn't see those at odds with one another. What James is looking at, what he takes issue with, is what's inside of our hearts. What is in our hearts? What we say and what we do. That's going to show whether our religion, quote unquote, is pure or whether it's wicked. And whether we really even hold on to what we say we believe. And I think that we've seen, frankly, the majority of the time in our lives, I think the reason we have shirts that say religion kills and things like that, is because most of the time we have seen people profess faith in something, but their lives look entirely different. The way that they speak doesn't seem to match up. And so we might look at religion as a negative word and as worthless as a thing, because that's probably what we've seen for most of our lives, this worthless religion that James is talking about. So, what is worthless religion? Well, let me give you the example of the Pharisees to start. Okay, so Pharisees were a religious sect, they were a Jewish religious sect, and they would often dress in very fine attire. They would make much of what they did throughout the week. Right? The idea of the Pharisees says, "Well, I fast twice a week," or whatever it is. I can't remember, 7 times a week. But just they boast of how religious they are, of how many religious acts they do. But Jesus had something to say about that to them. He, in this long, kind of scathing address that he gives to the Pharisees, one of the things that he says to them is he says in Matthew 23, 27 to 28, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. So you also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." So they were whitewashed tombs. What does that mean? So on the outside you have a tomb and it's been totally cleaned off. It looks very beautiful. It's white. It looks wonderful on the outside. But you know that on the inside of a tomb is dead men's bones. It's rot. It's death. And so he's calling them out and saying, "You look righteous on the outside. All those things on the outside, you look so righteous, but on the inside, you're rotten. There's death inside of you. There's a disconnect between how you're living and what's in your heart." It's a very good thing to be devoted to God. It's what we should be. But what if that devotion is heartless? Is that even true devotion at all? And the Pharisees thought, "Oh, how devoted are we to God? Look at what we do." But inside, they were dead. What if you're doing religious things, such as going to church, reading the Bible, praying, going on mission trips, all these things? What if those things? What if you're doing all of that out of duty? It's just something you're supposed to do. It's something that you feel like you should do, and you do it out of obligation rather than delight, rather than joy. I think these are all really important things to think about. What if you say that you're a Christian, but the way you speak and act says something else? And what James is really trying to get to the heart of here is one of the identifiers of false religion, of seeing what's actually in the heart, whether it's pure or whether it's dead men's bones. One of the indicators for that in our lives is what comes out of our mouths when we speak to one another. Husbands speaking to wives, wives speaking to husbands, friends speaking to friends, speaking to coworkers, speaking to relatives. Just how we use the tongue that God gave us, it's an indicator of what's really inside of our heart. And so James talks here about worthless religion being identified by someone with an unbridled tongue. So for anyone who takes care of horses, which I think there's a few in our church who do, you know what a bridle is, but I'll explain it to all of you. A bridle is the part that goes on the horse. Oh, here comes my dog. So the bridle is the part that goes on the horse. And, oh, there he is. Hey, buddy. Sorry, this is awesome. There we go. So the bridle is the part that goes on the horse. I need a bridle for my dog right now. But the bridle is the part that goes on the horse. It controls the horse's head, right? So it goes around. The bit goes inside of the mouth. And what it does when that bridle's on is it controls the horse's head. So you can control the horse's direction, right? You can control the horse's speed. So you're in charge of where that horse is going. That horse can't just go willy-nilly wherever it wants. And our tongues need to be controlled in a similar way. We have to be able to bridle the tongue because the tongue is just such, as we'll see in chapter 3 of James, it is a very dangerous thing that we have. But why does James bring it up here? We'll talk more about it in chapter 3, but why does he bring it up here? It's because you can think of yourself as righteous, as a devout follower of Jesus Christ, and yet if your speech doesn't match what you think about yourself, then you may actually be deceived, is what James says. If your speech doesn't match what's in your head about what you believe, then James says that you're deceived. And if you're deceiving yourself, then your religious thoughts and your religious deeds, none of those things are going to be genuine. None of them. You know, imagine, just take for instance, imagine that while I'm preparing this message, I think to myself, I'm doing my sermon prep and I'm getting everything ready. And imagine that I think in my mind this whole time, oh man, some of you is just so lucky to have me as a pastor. Like I just am such a great pastor. And why am I a great pastor? Oh, because I give long sermons, right? And that means that I care more about the word and I read my Bible and I pray and God just really blessed the church and has blessed me. And so the church is blessed because I'm doing such a great job. And, I spend hours preparing for a message by study and in prayer. And I've just given my life over to God. And look at all these amazing things that God can do through me. No, someone said they're lucky to have me. Okay. But imagine that I said that in my mind I'm thinking that during sermon prep. And I'm thinking about all these things, and I'm saying, "Oh, I'm doing so well," and it's not outright boasting, like, "Look at how great I am, everybody," and trying to draw other people's attention. But I'm saying, in my mind, I'm thinking all these thoughts about how gloriously religious I am, how I do all the right things, and it's going to benefit my church. So that's my prep. I'm getting ready for the sermon that way, and then I give the sermon. And the response to it is great. People say, "Oh, that was really good." And what does that do? Well, that's going to validate what I'm thinking in my head, right? So now I'm thinking, well, yeah, of course, I'm just God's gift to Greeley, right? And I'm thinking all these things, but I'm not coming out and saying it, right? I'm not outright boasting, but I'm thinking these things in my mind. And then imagine I go home. I just got validated by the church. People are saying, "Yeah, you're doing great," all this kind of stuff. Then imagine that I go home, and when I come home, something happens. Either my kids do something or my wife does something that irritates me, and I just let them have it. And I just let loose verbally, and I'm just verbally coming at them really strong. Now, if you saw from start to finish, inside my mind leading to that point, wouldn't you say about me, I think Paul's deceiving himself. I think there's something really wrong here. I mean, wouldn't you say that? That I can be so convinced in my mind that all these glorious religious things are good, and that I'm doing all these things, in my mind. Maybe I don't think I'm doing them for the right reason, but then when I am in private, I just let it all out and I have no control over my tongue. Wouldn't that show a disconnect? I think so. I mean, that would really be the epitome of self-deception. And this happens all the time. And we can get so caught up in this, right? It's easy to tell our kids, hey, you should do this and watch me do this, and I'm gonna model it for you. But then when we actually have to do it ourselves in private, or we don't have an audience, then we slip into all sorts of sinful behaviors. So it's like, maybe you show up on Sunday morning at church and you put on the perfect Christian face, and you say all the right Christian things, and you communicate that whenever you're in public. But in private, when you're with your family or with a roommate or whatever it is, then you just become, your mouth becomes this terrible weapon. That's self-deception. And James is trying to get us to avoid that. He's bringing that up to help us with that. And what this reveals is, if our tongues are saying things that are different from what's actually in our mind about ourselves and what we're putting out there, then that's actually an indicator of the heart. That's actually a great indicator of what's going on inside of our hearts. And it shows that there's a problem there. And that's why James talks here about the deceived heart. I think religion, the word in and of itself, and even the idea that we have in our minds, I think religion has a bad rap because it's so easy to fake it. It's so easy to do that. Like I just said, it's so easy to show up and say the right things and do the right things, and you just fake it while inside your heart you really don't care about it all that much. You're just putting on appearances, but you cannot hide the true heart of a person. You just can't. Excuse me. You can't hide it. At some point, it will come out. It'll come out in a brief word. Excuse me. It'll come out in a brief word, against a wife or a friend. Do you see the one that says 1 on there? Just bump it up just a little bit. You don't need to do much. It might start echoing again. So if it does, let me know. But you can't hide that heart. Eventually it'll come out in words, or it might come out in a lack of words. It's just the response to things. You can kind of see through how someone uses their mouth, how they speak, what's really going on in here. What's in your heart, excuse me, what's in your heart is going to come out of your mouth. Like I said, it's a terrific gauge for us in understanding what's really going on inside of a person. Jesus said this in Matthew 12. Excuse me, I have a really bad tickle in my throat. Matthew 12, 34 through 35. He says, "You brood of vipers, how can you speak good when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil." So in summary, your heart is really what matters here. When James is talking about all this stuff, religion is not the problem. It's our hearts that are the problem. That's what's going on here. So worthless religion, if we wanted to summarize it, is fake, it's hypocritical, and it's deceitful. And that explains why we don't like it, why we don't like that word, why we say religion kills, or relationship is better than religion. But James mentions religion in a positive light here as well. He talks about a pure and undefiled religion before God. If we are to profess belief in God and seek to live our lives according to His Word, this is what we must be aiming for. For something to be pure and undefiled, there can be nothing fake about it. This should be our goal as Christians, as religious people, to be seeking to have purity in our lives, seeking to not be stained by the world. And for something to be pure and undefiled, there's nothing fake about it. There can be no hypocrisy, no deceit. It's the opposite of what we just talked about. And because it's so easy to slip into duty, we have to redirect our thoughts and our affections so that what we believe would actually become a delight to live out. Just as the mouth revealed the deceived heart, like we just talked about, the mouth shows that and how we engage with other people and what slips out. James gives us two examples here of what reveals a pure heart before God. So if the tongue reveals what's wrong with our heart, what's wrong with our religion, then James is going to give us two examples of what shows what's right, what's a barometer for that. And the first one that he mentions here is to visit orphans and widows. Now, of all the things that James could have said here, why this? You think of all the things that he could say to show pure and undefiled religion. Why would he choose orphans and widows? Why would visiting them be such a big deal? Well, first of all, the word visit here has to do with caring for them. It's not just going and seeing them, it's providing care. So pure religion is about caring for others more than yourself. Going to see an orphan or caring for a widow, that's thinking of them above yourself. The Pharisees' religion was false because they only cared about themselves. And this is the total opposite of that. Second, the orphans and widows, they are groups of people that would have been passed over by much of the community. People would have just ignored them, or because they're difficult. They would have been difficult at that time, right? Why do we want to deal with orphans? Just let them loose. Just have them fend for themselves. Why would we want to deal with widows? They have all this baggage. Maybe they've got children, and now we have to care for them, and people would just turn them aside. But pure religion is doing what is right for people whom many people would otherwise ignore. It's doing the right thing for people who the world would ignore. That's something that James emphasizes. Third, these are people, if you think of widows and orphans, typically these are people that wouldn't be able to pay you back for your kindness. They don't have any, they might be poor, they might have low resources, low time, not enough time, not enough energy. Orphans certainly don't have a lot to offer there. And widows are going to be filled with grief for a time, if not for a long time. But they can't typically pay back the kindness that they've received from others. So in other words, you're not going to help an orphan or a widow if you want something in return. You help them just knowing that they can't pay you back, knowing they can't do anything for you. And that's pure religion. It's doing those things knowing that you may not receive anything back. It's loving people knowing that you may not be loved back. It's serving people knowing that you may not be served back in the end. That's true religion. And really, finally, caring for orphans and widows is pure and undefiled religion before God, in God's eyes, because He cares for the orphan and the widow, as well as the rest of humanity that has been cast out by the world, the poor, the sick, the disabled. You can see God's heart for that in Matthew 25:36. Matthew 25:36, which says, "I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. This is a place of need. And God cares about this. He cares about us caring for these people. In Isaiah 117, he says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. Seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless. Do what's right to the orphan. Plead the widow's cause. Be there. Support the widow. Care for them. You know, this is especially important for us to remember right now in the bigger picture with the coronavirus hysteria that is happening right now and all the panic. I was in Costco the other day, and it was just amazing to me how walking through the aisles, everybody looks at you like, do you have it? Do you have coronavirus? Do you have it? And people are kind of walking through and they're looking with these just worried faces and worried eyes, and you know, Lord forbid you might have a little tickle in your throat and cough for a second, because all of a sudden everybody looks at you like, oh my goodness, what are you even doing? Not self-quarantined. And we are in this spot right now where it's almost like if somebody were to have coronavirus, we'd almost, as a community, almost treat them like people would have treated lepers in Jesus's time, right? Unclean, get away from me. I don't want anything to do with you. You're going to make me sick. I'm going to die if I come near you, and all these things. And it's pushing people away for self-preservation. You know, get away from me. And we see that right now. Those of Asian descent are facing xenophobia on some level, right? Where just because they're Chinese or they look Chinese, people look at them as dangerous or wishing that they weren't around, which is just ridiculous. But it's happening. I saw it happen at the grocery store the other day, where a woman was walking around who was Asian, and I don't even think she was Chinese, but you could tell the avoidance in the room. You could tell that people were leery of her being there. And she may have been born here, but it's just the people tend to fall into this scared mentality and this fearful mentality where they only want to take care of themselves. The point being, just like James is pointing out caring for orphans and widows, the point being here is that we as Christians, brothers and sisters, we have a different calling. We really do. We are called to love the broken. We are called to care for the sick. We are called to provide love to the abandoned. And we are called to seek to provide general care for those who are in need. That's the church. Something that was so amazing to see when the coronavirus was far from us, but it was happening in China, was there were these Chinese Christians who, I think there should be a picture on the screen there, but there are these Chinese Christians who decided, okay, I am going to use this as an opportunity to love people. And so they sought to care for people who were walking around in various cities in China. And this picture shows the Christian is in the yellow suit. So he's taking precautions, but he's there. And he's asking, can I help you? Can I do anything for you? And they're serving the community, putting themselves at some sort of risk, not being irresponsible, not with a lack of prudence, but they're there. I had a brother text me last night, and I was so encouraged by his text, just saying, how can we help people? How can we figure out ways to love our neighbors and care for our neighbors during this time? And I'm just so glad to hear that those thoughts are going through people's minds, because otherwise, in this self-quarantine time, we will just disappear and hide in our homes, and that's not the calling of the Christian. Again, we want to be prudent. But this is such a wonderful time for us to show that we really do believe and really do follow a God who is sovereign over these things. This is the heart of God. This is his heart, and it should be the heart of the church, that we would love people. I mean, he came down into the worst possible world with people who didn't even want him, people who didn't even care about him, people who were his own people, and he pushed them away. And he came into that to save you, to save me. I mean, how incredible is that message? And who are we to say, thank you, Jesus, for that, but I'm going to not do what you did? That doesn't make any sense. Now, I understand that there's a lot of fear at this time, and I feel it too. Brothers and sisters, I hardly slept last night just thinking about how all of you are feeling and wondering what's going through your minds, and if you are panicking, if you're fearful, if you're anxious. And some of you may be, and some of you may be thinking, what's the big deal? Why did we cancel church? And I understand all those different thoughts. This is a very, very confusing time, and I think there's a lot of questions being asked of what then shall we do? What do we do? And, Martin Luther, who started the Protestant Reformation, he was alive during the Black Plague, right? The Black Death, which was infinitely more destructive so far that we know of than the coronavirus. And it was, thousands of people dying just daily from this thing. And Luther, he said this, and I really appreciate what he said. He said, I shall ask God mercifully to protect us. Okay, so I'm going to ask God in his mercy, would you protect us from the Black Plague? Or for us, Lord, in your mercy, would you protect us from the coronavirus? Then he says, then I shall fumigate, help purify the air, administer medicine, and take it. So I'm going to go to God for mercy, but I'm also going to fumigate. I'm going to try to stay safe here. I'm going to try to do the right thing. I'm going to go and help purify the air. I'm going to give people medicine so that they can take it. I'm not just going to let go and let God. I'm going to think about what's the best way to respond to this and still be faithful as a Christian. He says, I shall avoid places and persons where my presence is not needed, in order not to become contaminated and thus perchance inflict and pollute others, and so cause their death as a result of my negligence. Really helpful advice there. If God should wish to take me, he will surely find me, and I have done what he has expected of me, and so I am not responsible for either my own death or the death of others. If my neighbor needs me, however, I shall not avoid place or person, but will go freely as stated above. See, this is such a God-fearing faith because it is neither brash nor foolhardy and does not tempt God. I think if we can hold on to that quote and think about the mindset behind it, I think that will set us up pretty well for the next few weeks. The world right now is showing its true colors. The grocery stores are emptied. We went to try to go to King Soopers last night, totally empty. I guess one of the King Soopers down in a different city had to close because they ran out of stuff to sell midday. People are being very selfish. They're being very fearful, and they are caring really for themselves. And as concerning as coronavirus is, and it genuinely is a concern, in my opinion, it is not nearly as frightening as the possible evil that we may see in a humanity that can't handle this situation. Humanity is capable of the worst possible evils. And this coronavirus is bad, but we're starting to see just a taste of the selfishness of man. And that can lead to all sorts of things. And my prayer, honestly, is that it wouldn't be that way. That it wouldn't turn out to be this terrible disaster where people are looting or coming into other people's homes or anything like that. And I don't think that it will. It didn't happen in China. I don't think that it'll happen here. But the world is showing its true colors. And we really must not let ourselves slip into that. We really can't. We can't let ourselves fall into that same mentality that we see all around us. We cannot become like the rest of the world, church. We just can't. I know that I know that some of us are anxious. But we were told, do not be anxious about anything. Go back and listen to a few messages ago when we walked through that verse in Philippians. So care for other people. That's a show of pure religion. But the second thing is keeping unstained from the world. Now, this is all sorts of sins, and certainly James is talking about that. But if the whole world right now during this coronavirus, if the whole world falls apart, Christian, will we stand for godliness and holiness? Will we, or will we fall into the same fears and anxieties of the rest of the world? I mean, sadly, brothers and sisters, if we fall into that temptation of giving into those fears and anxieties, then we will be poor witnesses for Christ. In 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 14, it says, "Therefore, beloved, since you are waiting for these, be diligent to be found by him without spot or blemish and at peace." What if Jesus were to come back during this season? What if Jesus were to return while this coronavirus hysteria is happening? How would he find us? Would he come back to a church that's diligent in loving people through service and prayer? Would he come back to a church that's fighting desperately to hold on to peace, even though everything around them is confusing? Is that what he'd find in us? And I sure hope so. This really is a very difficult time for so many reasons: financial reasons, relational reasons, all sorts of things are causing confusion and worry. But brothers and sisters, we do have hope. We really do have hope. We are the church. We are the light in a dark place. We are the salt of the earth. We are the caretakers of this glorious truth that's been given to us. We are servants to the hurting, to the helpless, to the broken, to the sick. Now is our time, brothers and sisters, now is our time as a church to show the glories of Christ. Now is the time. There is no better time than now. Sure, we're going to be in our homes more than we are around others, but don't neglect the greatest tool that we have right now, and that's prayer. Be praying. We can make a lot of excuses a lot of times about not having time to pray. Well, that's going to be hard to make the excuse now if you're quarantined or if you're self-quarantined in your home. There's lots of times to play video games, lots of time to watch movies, lots of times to read books, but let it not be said that we are not praying. We must pray. We must be praying, and we're going to do that in a moment here. For those of us with families, enjoy this time with your family. Rest. I kind of wonder if God is forcing a Sabbath upon us a little bit. We're being forced to rest, forced to think about how to love one another well in our families. Enjoy one another. Play games. Watch movies. Do those things. Enjoy each other's company. Have wonderful conversations together. Ask questions that maybe you haven't been able to ask. You've got time now if you aren't, if you're stuck at home. Rest, laugh, pray together. And while many people right now are trying to get as far away from others as possible, be different. Ask your neighbor how you can help. Ask your neighbor if you can go to the grocery store for them. Now, if you have an elderly neighbor or someone who's high risk and you're feeling sick, obviously don't put them at risk. But if you are feeling healthy, even though I know that can still mean you have it, But if you use discernment and through prayer you feel like I really can't help this neighbor, seek out opportunities to do that. Go around and see if you can pray for people. Just ask them, hey, I don't have to stay, but can I just pray with you? I'll stand outside your door so you're not freaked out, but can I pray for you? And these are just really great opportunities to do that. So speaking of prayer, as our greatest tool right now, we're going to spend some time in prayer together. And these are a few things that the Bonnells put together. There's 3 slides, I think, and we'll just start with the first one. And so if you just want to take, I'll give you, 3 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to pray through the first slide. And then we'll move to the second slide and you can pray about those things. And then we'll move to the following slide. And then we may sing a song or two. But let me pray, and then you can take some time to pray through that first slide. Lord God, I thank you for our church family, and for whoever is watching this. I don't know if the technology even worked at all, but in trusting you, we hope that this is helpful. I hope that this is beneficial, and I hope that this reminds us that the church doesn't stop, that some of you hasn't stopped being a church, that the church is the people living in their communities, actively pursuing mission work, gospel work, caring for people. Lord, would you help us? Maybe this is the time where we really understand what it means to be the church, that Sunday mornings are so valuable, and that's a wonderful time for us to gather together and love one another and encourage one another and care for one another. It's a wonderful time to be under the teaching of God's word. But we also have the rest of our lives, and what are we doing with that? And maybe this is the time, Lord, where we will grow in that. So, Father, as we take time as a church scattered, praying through these things, I pray that you would bless us and you would bless the work of our hands. Help us to be people who are of a pure religion, that it's undefiled by the world, that it's before your eyes a wonderful thing, and help us to seek you out in word and in deed. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Go ahead and take some time to pray. I'm just going to play my guitar here while you pray, and then we'll switch to the next slide. we'll go ahead and switch to the second slide on prayer. You can be praying for this as well for about 2 to 3 minutes. All right, let's go ahead and move to the next slide for prayer. Give you a few minutes to pray that. So we're going to try to sing Rock of Ages together. We can only do songs written before 1920, so because of copyright stuff. So we're going to do some hymns, at least one, maybe two, but we're going to sing Rock of Ages together. Maybe. We'll see. So, good to go on slides, buddy? Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flowed be of sin the double cure. Save from wrath and make me pure. Not the labors of my hands can fulfill thy law's commands. Could my zeal no respite know? Could my tears forever flow? All for sin could not atone. Thou must save, and thou alone. Nothing in my hand I bring, simply to the cross I cling. Naked come to thee for dress, helpless look to thee for grace. Foul I to the fountain fly, wash me, Savior, or I die. While I draw this fleeting breath, and mine eyes shall close in death, when I soar to worlds unknown, see thee on thy judgment throne. Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. So I think we're going to try to do one more, and then I'll let you all go for this morning. If anyone's still there, it's great. Love worshiping with you, even if we're scattered. But we're going to do A Mighty Fortress is Our God, that was written by Martin Luther, and speaks a lot about the devil and his fight against us as the church, but also speaks to just that we have something solid to stand on. We have a mighty fortress to abide in this time. A mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper, he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. For still our ancient foe does seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate. On earth is not his equal. If we in our own strength confide, our striving would be losing. Were not the right man on our side, the man of God's own choosing. You ask who that may be. Christ Jesus, it is He, the Lord of hosts His name, from age to age the same. And He must win the battle. And though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, for God hath willed His truth to triumph through us. The Prince of Darkness grim, we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word shall fail him. That word above all earthly powers. No thanks to them abideth. The Spirit and the gifts are ours, through Him who with us abideth. Let God and kindred go, this mortal life also. The body they may kill, God's truth abideth still. His kingdom is forever. Amen, church. God bless you guys, and I hope you have a great Sunday and a great week with your families and in your jobs. And just be praying for one another. Again, we'll send out that prayer list today, and maybe some other recommendations of things you can read, things you can be looking at during this time. Love you, church, and we'll see you next week.